Okay, so this is the parklet outside my house, which is looking very lovely. I took this the other day, and that's one of the things that we will be talking about today. Um, but first of all, I need to give you a bit of an introduction about where all this has come from. So we've been talking about curbside and parking ourselves, but also alongside Possible, an organisation who campaign on climate issues, and indeed the rest of the coalition, the Healthy Street Scorecard Coalition, for some time. So because we feel that parking policy is one of the most effective tools local authorities can use to reduce car use and car ownership, but it's also much more than about cars. So we're really concerned that there remains quite low ambition in using parking policy to tackle really serious issues like climate change and air pollution, to promote active travel or to create greener streets, the greener streets we need to tackle the climate and nature crises. So this builds on our work. So what we're doing is launching our new leaflet today, which I showed you, but that builds on our work. And I put a couple of links here so that you can see that we've done work on, on our page on why boroughs need to reassess parking policy. But also the 2023, we created a parking action tool, which is a benchmark for local authority parking policy. So you can see that if you go to that link too. But I don't want to focus too much on parking today. I just want to talk about all the great things that we can do with our streets. Although parking, we do have to say a little bit about it to start with. So parking matters for lots of reasons. It's important in reducing traffic, in promoting mode shift, promoting healthier travel choices, freeing up space for lots of reasons, in eliminating road casualties, improving the urban realm, and also in many respects, it can help to deliver local economic recovery, but that's more about high streets. And we're talking about residential streets today. I've talked before about why parking is important to our countryside. It's also very much about delivering fair use of public space and resources. When you think about in many parts of London that 65 to 70% of households don't own a car. So I've put two slides in here about local authority powers, just so it's there. But as I say, you can come back to these if you want to. So I've got a couple of examples of things that we don't like, and one of the things that I think you see regularly is streets which are literally parking from one end to the other with literally nothing else on them. In this case, they've also allowed them to park on the pavement on both sides of the road. It's extraordinary. But another problem is, of course, that we've lost all of our front gardens in many places. So there are different problems in different places, and we'll be talking about all of that today. But those give you a couple of examples of what not to do, if you like. So this is our residential street 12 design elements. We're going to go through these today, so you don't need to absorb them all right away. And this is going to be on our web page. There's also an accessible version on the web page and a PDF version, as well as an image file if you'd like to download any of that. So number one, I'm going to be talking about some of these, and then everyone else will be talking about some of the same ones and some other ones. So the first thing is, of course, that we need parking to be controlled. Otherwise, you end up with problems. And of course, we need disabled bays as appropriate. This is a map of where there is controlled parking in London. You can see that some boroughs have 100% controlled parking now, which is what we would advocate. Small area zones so that you can't just drive between them. And this is an image of before and after controlled parking, which is trying to show that people often nuisance park or park in places which block access or block, emergency vehicles getting in, and just block block everything basically. And then that's after, and it also shows how much the parking in this location was not residents. It was people coming from elsewhere to park. This is another example of before and after controlled parking. As you can see, there's a school. Well, you might be able to see school there. So it's making the road much safer with much better sight lines by controlling the parking and removing it from one side of the road. So I don't want to go into too much about controlled parking zones and the benefits, but I've put a slide in there that you can come back to. I did want to say briefly something which isn't talked about much, which is the need for loading bays on residential roads, but also car share bays. So loading bays to avoid double parking and parking at junctions, but car share bays for a different reason. That's to support move away from car ownership, to enable people to not own a car, but instead to just use car clubs occasionally when they need a car. So a couple of images here. One is, what tends to happen if delivery vans don't have somewhere to park. They will park on a corner where it's dangerous and where it gets in the way of sight lines for pedestrians or even people in vehicles. And then on the right, there's just parking in the middle of the road is pretty standard if you can't find somewhere to park as a delivery driver. And actually, it's a problem for householders because sometimes delivery drivers just say they can't deliver if there's nowhere to park. So yeah, that's your space for car clubs, vital to support a move away from car ownership and to enable people to not have to own a car. So cycling, of course, there are different types of cycle provision which need to be provided on lots of streets, including residential streets. So there's secure cycle parking for people in cycle hangars, so that's for residents on that street. Then there's cargo bikes and disabled cycles. There needs to be space for those. For cycle hire, so the line bikes and so forth. So you need space for dockless bikes. And what we would call destination parking. So that's if somebody's coming to the street to visit and want to tie their bike up, want to lock their bike up. Frequently that ends up being tied to a lamppost or on the pavement somewhere, which creates an obstruction. So there are lots of reasons why you need lots of different types of cycle of space to be used for different types of cycle provision. So there's some pictures of cycle hangars for residents. That's some destination parking on the left there. There's a dockless bay at the top there, and that shows what you're trying to avoid at the bottom there. Of course, you can also use space for cycle lanes too, and that's quite important. I just wanted to make another point about cycling, one last point about cycling and supporting cycling, which is something that Jeremy will talk more about, which is low traffic neighbourhoods and speed limits, which are of course one of the most important things to promote cycling. Aside from the infrastructure needed to store bikes, of course, you need to be safe riding them. So moving on, I am trying to go quickly so that we have time for everyone else. So number 5 on our list is rain gardens. So rain gardens take rainwater from the road runoff and they capture it and they store it for a while so that it doesn't go into the drains because that's a massive problem in London at the moment. Water goes into drains, it overwhelms the sewers, and then the sewers overflow into the rivers, and also they cause flooding. So Thames Water has said we need 357,000 of these in London in order to cope with the problems that we're facing with rainwater in London. So you should be expecting to see not just one, but maybe more than one on your street, particularly if you're an area of risk. And many of you may already have them. These are examples of rain gardens in action. So front gardens, we've done a lot of work on front gardens. Sorry, I should have said that I put a link to more on the rain gardens issue down there. We've got a whole page on that. And here I've got a page on front gardens. And of course, greening up our streets is very much about front gardens too. Front garden action is a whole subject in itself. So, we've set up a front garden network, and we've set up a community front garden network, which you can find out about through that link. And we've also now working with Create Streets to set up a local authority front garden network. And all of that's about depaving and regreening front gardens. And of course, sometimes that relates to car parking. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does. So yeah, that's absolutely something that we would promote. Here's some pictures of front gardens which are nice and green. And you saw earlier the picture that I showed you of the street where nearly every garden had been removed and with completely paved for car parking. Has all kinds of problems for water runoff and heat in particular. And I know that Carolyn will come on to that with her Get Shady presentation. So there you go, some not so good and some good. This is just a slide that I do on front garden to show you the problems with parking and overhanging cars. But again, I don't want to talk too much about that, just to say that there are solutions and that we are working on them. So I've put in some slides on that, which you can come back to. So finally, from me, I just want to mention Create Streets Greening Up report, which has some practical recommendations in it, and I would definitely suggest that you also have a look at that. So that's it from me. That's my parklet again. It had lots of daffodils this year, very nice. And that's it from me for the moment. So we're going to move on now to Jeremy Leach from London Living Streets. Jeremy, you can, I'm going to stop my share. We can move on to you, Jeremy. And Jeremy, if you introduce yourself as well.
Hi, lovely to speak to you all. Thank you, Jeremy Lee. Can everybody see that slide okay? Is that visible? Great, thank you. So it's lovely to be here. Thanks, and huge thanks to Alice and colleagues for this fantastic work to put the residential design guide, street design guide together. It's exceptional. It's really exciting to be part of this. My name's Jeremy Leach from London Living Streets, but I'm also got a sideline, whereas I'm the London campaign coordinator for 20's Plenty. And if we're going to come on to low speeds in a little while, and if anybody's interested in their borough around lower speed limits than 20 mile an hour, please do get in touch. I'll pop my email address in at the end. So here's some images of some things that we aspire to, and the things I'm going to cover. I'm not going to cover all of the 12 elements. I'm going to cover 6 of them, which are as follows. And I promise this is really quick, and it's all image based. There's not tons of text. And just to say, almost all of the photos are from Walworth in Southwark in SC17, near where I live. And I suppose I make that point just to say that all of this stuff that you see, the good and the bad, it's all around you. And I suppose it's really easy to find and take in and go, I really like that, and oh, that's not so good. So it's lovely to look around the area where you live and start to be able to look at the changes that are occurring and need to change. So first of all, just running in order, street trees. Street trees are obviously amazing. They give so much back, but the problem is that over time they grow. And as you can see, this I've just popped in there's a tiny yellow dot at the end, and that is Kennington Tube Station at the far end of that row. So this is the main walking route to Kennington Tube Station from the south. And as you can see, that is such a crowded route every day. And obviously, we're talking to Southwark Council an awful lot about this route. It's so important. Maybe we could reconsider all that parking on the east side of the street and think about that. But street trees are amazing. They contribute so much. But if we can plan this now, like in the next slide, here's some images of the role they can play if they're not planted on the footway, on the pavement, and then you design them into the street. And here, look, there's a couple of bollards in front of the two on the left to give them a bit of protection while they were growing. They don't need that protection now. Things very much choose to avoid them, but they really, they enhance it. They narrow the street. They help slow vehicles down. And even this one on the right hand side, that very much helps with its partner on the other side to slow vehicles down in that spot. So put in the right place, they can do more than just be gorgeous shady things. And then we're going to come on to low traffic and slow traffic. And I think a huge hats off to the London Cycling Campaign for all their work that they initiated around low traffic neighbourhoods and low traffic. But this is some of the results of that. Again, a location doing a huge amount of work. It's a bus gate. So what happened, this was really quite a wide road at this point because there was a shopping parade on the right hand side, a local garden area on the left hand side. But suddenly it was like, it's a bus gate. What do we have to still have all that width in the footway? No, we don't. We can narrow this down. I don't quite know. We had to have a Belisha beacon pedestrian crossing there, but the regulations currently require it. But a huge amount of space, that there's lots of plans around the area to green that up. But again, a much more people-friendly, huge space used a great deal by pedestrians. And then another little low traffic neighborhood filter. Again, lot going on here. Cycle filter. A little bit of play on the way, with those stepping stones in the brown area. That's being grown out. That's only just gone in. Some seating, a new entrance to the little playground on the right, a suds on the far right hand side, and obviously very usefully an upturned shopping trolley on the just by that. So lots of things going on in a really quite small space. And then a lovely little scheme that went in during COVID originally as a non-permanent scheme. So they did a lovely thing, which was not just have a timed school street, they just put in a permanent school street, which was originally only bollards. And it had a huge effect on this area down towards Camberwell, of almost creating a low traffic neighbourhood on its own because of this quite significant filter. And then they've gone back to it and put in these lovely design elements, like these very playful pencils by what was at the time a school, and then the seating and the suds and the planting areas. So lots going on there. Came from just a simple bollard originally. So just going to go on to slow traffic rather. I think it's really important to say that I hope wherever you live, I hope your local authority's got a default 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. It makes such a difference. We need, wherever we're talking about residential streets, at the very least, we should be talking about 20 mile an hour. Just some different types. I put the link into this fantastic piece of work that Transport for London did, Achieving Lower Speeds Toolkit. It's not really referred to enough. It's a fantastic detailed piece of work that looks at what's most effective in slowing vehicles down. Never go for cushions. They don't work. As vehicles have got wider, vehicles straddle them. They are not effective compared with the fantastically more effective 100mm high full width sinusoidal hump. So that's it, that should become the workhorse of traffic calming where it's needed in residential areas. Not much more expensive to put in than, say 2 or 3 cushions side by side. Really effective, works well for people going slowly, and great for cycling. And then another version of that, a raised table, but we've seen that you can use that on a relatively wide residential street. It's narrowing it down as well because you've got the little build out on the far side. And then finally, sort of like, what's this photograph doing? Well, it's a really interesting photograph because it shows the example. It's an example of full width sinusoidal humps, so full width traffic calming on a bus route. So this is a single decker route, but there are examples of traffic calming on residential streets with double decker buses. But I just think it's really important to know that you can put effective traffic calming where there are bus routes. So just a nice example there. We're talking about carriageway having not excess width. This is a remarkable street in West Walworth. I don't know how it got designed or what happened, but I walked the distance the other day between the edges of the two. But it's 24 meters. I mean, I think that's more than probably many dual carriageways. It's absolutely remarkable. And what this has meant is, looking this way to the west, what you've got is you've got this hatching where I'm standing, but then you've got a series of full width sinusoidal humps stretching over to west. But when you turn around and look the other way, you've got this huge amount of work that's been needed to try and get some of the capacity out of this. What is a residential road with the estate on the right and then the 30s housing on the left. So a great deal of effort. So the idea of trying to slim these streets down and not have excess calming is really important. Excess capacity is really important, and sort of speak to that idea of giving different uses over to it. And this is a lovely example by a school, by a local park, where there was street all the way up to that wall in the far distance. Local community project said, let's repurpose this, especially by the entrance to the school on the left. So put in some trees, some really innovative designs for the trees, and then created pedestrian surfacing for the whole of the rest of the street. And then we're going to come on to clear, even pavements and no obstructions. Well, here's the opposite of that. So on the left, we've got bins that seem to have a life of their own and then take up a huge amount of space. E-bikes, which are a perennial problem. And then this remarkable, there used to be and originally was a tree on the right-hand side, which got removed about a couple of months ago. And they put a new tree there, but there's a little bit of work to do still on the quality of the paving there. So hopefully Southwark will come back to that. And obviously, you know, littered with overhanging cars, bins, and then bikes filling up the space as well. And then one of the problems with echelon parking or perpendicular parking is that the vehicles tend to sort of put their bumpers and stuff over the edge. So it's quite important to try and do something about it. And this is and just a relatively easy example. They can go right up to the these SUVs and stuff can really impinge almost to the railings. And then there's an emerging problem which we highlight in our highlighted really, which is electric vehicle charging infrastructure. This is typically what's done, which can in this location can really narrow the footway. And then another example of that is, oh well, let's just shove a wire across it. But hey, you know, we'll ameliorate that with this little bit of yellow paving, yellow sort of plastic stuff. Here's a better example. This is from Hackney Council, where they've done it properly. They put the infrastructure fully on the carriageway and had far less impact on the footway itself. And then examples, you know, this is what it looks like when you do a really good job. Recently laid footway, relatively uncluttered, lovely sort of walking route through as unobstructed pavement. And then another example of continuous footway that's put in, recently put in, it looks a bit barren. There's a couple of street trees due to go in and a bit more planting. But again, in a location where you've got some cycle parking, you've got a filter and you've got some seating, here we've got a nice continuous footway with hopefully the appropriate tactile paving on either side of the junction. And again, much more playful. This is Street Parks Play on the Way. This is a really lovely scheme that was worked on by Sustrans in conjunction with Southwark Council. How can we make the filters that we create also do other things? And what we've got here is we've got little pocket parks, we've got Play on the Way, we've got a sort of things for insects on the far right hand side and new trees. And this is a particularly lovely one. It does so many different things. So on the right hand side on the pavement, you've got the play for children. Every time children go past there, they stop and start, and their parents are going, come on, come on, come on, because the children are just loving stopping there and playing on these things. You've got a really nice sort of planting with fruit trees. And this is the important bit. Southwark worked with this local project called the Alberta Fruit Commons, so that not just street trees in there, they consulted the Fruit Commons group and said, what do you want in here? And so there's a whole load of new fruit trees which complement all the work that the Alberta Fruit Commons group were doing. So again, the community working to have what they want in terms of what gets implemented in a street space improvement scheme. And another example of a sort of multifunctional space that's been created here. So finally, junctions with appropriate roadway. This is an utterly remarkable event. I think it's probably, this junction is a function of the fact those are 1930s development just off Herne Hill. And I think at the time was, you know, let's build the widest display possible. But as you can see, it's huge. This is from September 2009. And it was so huge that the desire line for pedestrians, or the crossing point, is set way back from the road itself, and the drop curbs which were later introduced have been put a long way back, so huge diversion in order to get there. Thankfully, years later, it has been still not quite perfect, but it's still pretty good, and part of a scheme where that was tightened up hugely. So not covered everything there. Hope that was of interest. Thank you.
Amazing, Jeremy, and I hope our audience aren't too concerned about how quickly we're going, but we're just trying. We've got so much to say, and we want to get it in. So I'm going to move straight over to Kate. And Kate, while you're putting your slides up, Jeremy, I noticed that Councillor Mary Mitchell was asking about exactly where those examples are. So perhaps I think Helen Munger had said where a couple of them might be, but then if you can pick that one up, that'd be great. So yeah, without further ado, over to Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm one of the campaigns and policy leads at Wheels for Wellbeing, and we are a disabled people's organisation working to improve the accessibility of walking, wheeling, cycling, and above walking speed mobility for all disabled people. And residential streets are absolutely critical to that, because if you don't have access from your house, from your doors, you can't visit other people on your street, you can't get out, you can't do important trips, you can't be a part of the community. So having accessibility for everybody is absolutely critical, and the residential street elements, every single one of the 12 is really important. So over 20% of the population are disabled, and disabled people are routinely excluded from all forms of transport. So Transport for All recently released a report which is very, very clear that a very high proportion of disabled people struggle to use any different forms of transport. On the right, we've got a wheelchair user who is travelling using a wheelchair carrying cycle with an attendant. And you're on a residential street, which again has the continuous parking down the sides. So we need to look at things like blocked incomplete routes, lack of provision for accessible cycling, lack of accessible public transport, insufficient access to private and private hire vehicles. And all the residential street elements really help with those things. Focusing with mobility justice, so targeting resources towards people who have the least access to transport and mobility rather than people who already have the most access. So I've picked 6 of the residential street elements to look at because Alice said we had 10 minutes, so I'm sticking to time as hard as I can. I could have picked any of them. They are all really, really important to accessibility. And as with everything, the devil is in the detail. So with cycle parking, we've got this lovely photo on the right from Cycle Hoop, which is a young man with his thumbs up at a cycle hoop parking bay. And his semi-recumbent tandem has fitted beautifully into this bay. It does not have step-free access. So somebody who needs step-free access to their bay won't be able to use that. And the key thing is there's no one-size-fits-all solution for accessible parking. So as Alice mentioned, you need different types of cycle parking. We've got cycle parking for larger cycles at the top of image 3. We've got cycle parking for standard bicycles for visitors at the bottom, and a cycle hanger for longer term parking, because the last thing you want to be doing is leaving a cycle that can be worth up to £10,000 out on a street improperly secured for a longer period of time. You might leave it once in a while. There's also a little detail which is often missed with cycle parking, which is this drop curb in between the cycle parking bays. If you don't have level access onto the footway, but you need level access onto a footway, you can't get to or from your cycle parking. And that applies to disabled car parking bays as well. People can get very stuck. Fortunately, some of the later street elements do also deal with that one. But having flexibility with the parking is key for cycling, especially on streets where people don't have a garden or rear access or driveways or garages where they can park their own cycles. Street trees are a real equity and equality measure. You need green infrastructure, you need the cooling effects that you get from the street trees. A lot of people with chronic health conditions really struggle with extremes of temperature. It causes serious health impacts. We know that people die from excess heat, and the people who are dying are often people who are disabled, who have chronic health conditions. So having street trees, having SUDs, having green infrastructure is absolutely critical for the immediate climate mitigation and longer term mitigations for disabled people's mobility and disabled people's equity. It's really, really important. And again, as Jeremy said, making sure that they are not obstructing the footway. And if trees are mature and they're already in the pavement and they're causing lumps, you can make build outs that go around the existing tree. So you can extend the footway out into the road, take up some of those parking bays and make sure that people have the option to get around. The photos that we're showing are a little bit cycle heavy. So we've got somebody using a recumbent trike on a street with street trees. They're cycle heavy because they're all from our free to use inclusive cycling guides. If anyone wants to have access to these, we have a photo bank of these photos and people can use them. So then on to low traffic and slow traffic, as Alice discussed. And again, we've got somebody cycling through a CCTV modal filter with planters. It's in the rain. You can cycle in all weathers. There's actually no drop curb shown here. It's just, you can see it just in the corner of the picture. So there is a drop curb crossing. And we've also then got this car here, which is much too close to the drop curb crossing. So get visibility if you're a smaller person or with a lower head height, to come out around parked cars. And that's one issue. So on the low traffic and slow traffic, we can see we've got tactile paving, the full width of a raised table, carrying people straight across the road because you've got a lovely small corner radius, as Jeremy was talking about. So it's really easy for people to work out which direction to go and to maintain their desire line all the way across the residential street. The planters have been put back away from the tactile paving. So whenever planters are going in or any measures to make a modal filter, they really need to not obstruct the pedestrian desire line, because otherwise people are going to have their journeys broken. Especially, we sometimes see planters being put directly at the bottom of a drop curb. That's really not great if you're using a wheelchair or a mobility scooter, or if you're visually impaired or with a pushchair. So just making sure that you get the details really carefully installed, and then having those lower motor vehicle numbers and lower speeds makes streets more accessible for absolutely everyone, even if you're using a motor vehicle, because you need to get into and out of it somehow. And making the lower numbers is absolutely critical for disabled people's access. And then making sure we've got the crossings. So we've mentioned drop curbs a number of times. Here's just a simple drop curb cut in. If you can do the raised table as well and the build outs, that's even better. That will make it even more easy to use. But having any drop curb is critical. Otherwise, people who are using wheeled mobility aids or who can't step off a curb are completely stuck. And we've got the image to the right, which is a famous one showing the severance that gets caused by streets. The severance that disabled people experience is much, much greater than the severance that most non-disabled people experience, because if you can't step off a 100mm height of curb, every edge of every street looks like a cliff. You can't get anywhere. So we need to make sure we have crossings at least every 100 meters. And 100 meters is a really long way if you just want to pop over and see a neighbor. So as often as possible, making it feasible for as many people as possible to cross the street. And then the minimum 2-meter width, clear, even pavements. And that's been covered really clearly by Jeremy, making sure you have that width. So the minimum that's permitted at a restriction point in much guidance is actually 1 meter. But at the same time, a lot of that guidance is pointing out that if you use a long cane or you're being assisted, you're using an assistance dog, your width is going to be up to 1.2 meters. If you're a parent pushing a double buggy with a child alongside, you're going to be wider than 1 meter. And people need to go in both directions, up and down a footway. So even 2 meters is pretty stingy, especially if there is anything else on that footway. So really, wider is better. And on the right, I've included a picture here which looks like you have a lovely clear 3-meter width path. It's actually a shared width path that's near me, and I'm in Derby, I'm not in London, so this applies across the whole country as well. And it's a gorgeous path, but unfortunately the trees are, I've measured it now, it's about 1.2 meters above ground level across the full width of the path. So you can have your vegetation cut back on either side, that's great. Let's remember to cut the stuff that's above you as well. Otherwise, people who can't see what's coming are going to walk face first into a tree. Or if they can't use an arm to brush it out the way and can't duck enough, again, you're a bit stuck. So high level obstructions are still obstructions. Making sure we've got the vegetation management in place, especially from boroughs and other councils, to get residents to cut back the branches. And I think this one's my last one. It's the final 12th point. Junctions clear of parking, small turn radii. I think we've covered this pretty comprehensively. And again, it's Southwark's coming up a lot here. This is a lovely set of examples. They're actually improving this junction as part of a new scheme, but compared to most of the country, it's pretty improved already. We've got bollards preventing parking. We've got markings around the edge, raised tables, tactile paving going in correct directions. It's lovely. It's going to really make everyone go slowly, and it makes it much easier to cross. The more major of the roads has a zebra crossing as well. So making sure you've got the sight lines, making sure you've got the accessible crossings, and it just enables as many people as possible to use their own neighbourhoods and be a part of the community. So thanks very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kate. And even 1 minute before time. So while Carolyn's putting her slides up, I just wanted to say that when we created the leaflet, I asked Kate to look over the designs and to my shame, I mean, she had to adjust every single one of them, because I think the complexity of designing for the very large range of disabilities is something which, you know, none of us know enough about, basically. So huge thanks to Kate for helping with that, making sure that we did it right. And just to also say quickly that I kind of feel like it's a lens through which we see a lot of people's lives. Maybe you don't have a disability, you're just older, like my parents, who are both 90 now, living in London, and, you know, every time they go out the door, I'm just, you know, terrified. It's very hard for them to get across the road to see through cars parked, or even if you have a buggy, a small child, whatever. Yeah, so moving on now to Carolyn. Yeah, Carolyn's going to introduce herself. So yeah, keep the chat coming as well, everybody. It's all looking great.
I'm just going to start my timer to keep an eye on the time. So I'm Carolyn and I'm curbside greening manager at Possible. So I'm mostly going to be talking about number 4, which is the street trees, but also a little bit about parklets. So just a couple of slides on Possible in case anyone is not familiar with our work. We're a climate action charity. We work nationally, but most of my work is focused on London, and we focus on these different mission areas: getting around, where we live, getting away, and what we buy. So this work, although it's kind of place-based, is linked to the getting around theme. And we did a lot of work through our Car-Free Cities project, which was from 2021 to 2023, and that was across Bristol, Birmingham and Leeds, as well as London, all about kind of accelerating the shift towards, when we say car free, we're not talking about completely car free, but, you know, reducing car use and shifting more towards things like car clubs. And then the Parklets campaign came out of that. We helped to influence Lambeth with their pioneering curbside strategy, and we wanted to see more boroughs adopting those kind of aims. You know, similarly progressive, looking for 25% of curbside dedicated to sustainable uses. So as part of that campaign, we supported some communities to create their own parklets, which can be useful for things like providing cargo bike parking where people don't have anywhere to put a cargo bike, and you can add some planters like this one in Waltham Forest, this one on a housing estate. So this is actually the area that you saw in Alice's presentation earlier, in a previous life, before it was, you know, when it was all car parking before the CPZ was brought in. And that slide on the picture on the right is how it's looking now after a year, really flourishing. And our parklet resources, I'm just going to navigate to, so we produce a lot of resources. This is where we sort of come in. We have lots of assets and things that that people can use for campaigning and so on. So the toolkits, we've got one for local authorities and one for communities. So let's have a quick look at the one for local authorities. So it's got case studies in there, it's got lessons learned from local authorities that have got parklet processes and policies, community policies, which is 4 boroughs at the moment, and different types and different approaches. Yeah, so hopefully that's useful. And this is our sort of before and after. So we've also got these for specific cities, but this is a sort of typical London street. Yeah, so let me go back to that, and then just quickly showing you our resources. We've got the parking action tool that Alice mentioned earlier, and the map showing the how the different local authorities scored, various other things, design your own parklet tools. Yeah, and this little animation here. So all of this stuff, you know, is there for people to make use of. So let me just go back to, hang on, Zoom bar's in the way. Sorry, let me move that. There we go. Back into the slides. And that brings us to Get Shady, which is our campaign, which is specifically around replacing car parking with trees, as we've seen some nice examples of today. I'm sure you guys know why we need to do this. I mean, what I've put here is all focused on the need for adapting in terms of the increased risk of heat waves. So that's one of the areas we've looked at. Obviously, air pollution, noise reduction, equity. There's, all of the reasons that I'm sure probably everybody on this call is aware of. And obviously, this shows the difference between a street full of cars and a street with tree canopy in terms of mitigating heat. And just a nod to sort of policy, the policy framework is there to basically build curbside trees on build outs, but this is more of a challenge when we're talking about retrofitting existing streets. Another shout out for the Greening Up report that Alice mentioned earlier, and the 330-300 rule, where everybody should be able to see at least 3 large trees from where they are, and with some green space really close by. So that Greening Up report showed that people's mental health is improved the more access they have, like really close to home. So it's no good having, a lovely park that it's really difficult to get to 10 minutes away. It's got much more impact having more green space, within your street. So sorry, this is just a long slide with lots of text, but basically we've got funding from City Bridge Foundation to work in 4 London boroughs to replace car parking with curbside street trees, and doing that in conjunction with communities. So I'll show you our data explorer in a moment, but the main focus of this is that our data set includes the different data sets we have include pavement widths. So we've looked at the where the narrowest pavements are. So where those areas are that really need more tree canopy, but there's nowhere else, for those trees to go other than in the curbside. I'll give you a quick look of the Data Explorer, which is not yet published. So this URL will be taken down at 2 o'clock, because we can't share it because it's not quite finished. But I just thought I'd give you a sneak preview, so you can put your area in. I'll look at Manby Grove, which is where we hope to be working in Newham, and then you can look at that depending on different oh, it's taking a little while to load, but there's like a priority analysis, and then there's all the different data sets like urban heat island effect, air pollution, highest level of deprivation, and so on. So going back to the other phases of the project, we'll be delivering workshops with Active Travel Academy to understand local people's experiences and perceptions about walkability, heat waves, urban greening, and we'll be producing these type of community maps. That's one from More Than Minutes. I should have put a copyright in for them. And we did a similar thing when we produced our car-free visions, with the difference being there that these were kind of utopian visions. So this was what the residents in Tooting wanted to see. This was how they would like to see Tooting Broadway Junction in a car-free future. But this is something we weren't expecting to be able to then implement afterwards, whereas we will with this project. So after we've done that work with the communities, we'll be looking to actually plant those trees in those locations, but obviously we have to assess them to make sure that they're feasible from an underground utilities point of view, safety point of view, and so forth. So a couple of examples where we're going to be doing this. We're working in Lewisham, we've also got Street Trees for Living as a partner, and Lewisham Council want to bring in, through their Sustainable Streets scheme, more controlled parking. And there are areas like Bellingham that were built between the wars where there's just that there is no space for parking. So at the moment it's all on the pavement. So we hope to replace some of that parking on the pavement with street trees, and yeah, they'll be bringing in CPZs as part of that process. And then in Newham, Manby Grove, the one that I was just looking up, this is one where they've brought in a low traffic neighbourhood at one end. They're looking at bringing in one at the other end, but there's also issues where I think you can see with that tree there where it is creating access issues, and there are wheelchair users that live in the street that have to go in the road at the moment. So one of the options that we might look at with in those workshops with the communities is what Kate mentioned earlier, having build outs, potentially that go round, to avoid having to get rid of those sort of mature trees. Okay, yeah, so as I said, we have lots of resources that can be useful. The Get Shady project is at quite an early stage, but the Data Explorer will be coming out soon. So do sign up to our newsletter if you want to sort of stay up to date with that. And obviously, I'm happy to take any questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Carolyn. I just saw that somebody had asked if this applies to high streets as well as residential streets. This is very much focused on residential streets, and we would have a whole load of other things that we would want to see on high streets as well. The other thing was that Councillor, just Mary Mitchell again asking about how to bring communities along with you. And I think, Carolyn, maybe you can be in touch, and because I know Possible have done a huge amount of work around that. But also, I think one of the things I'd say is that, for example, I remember having a conversation with councillors at Lambeth who talked about making sure that they're trying to get the voices of those people who don't own cars. So obviously there's the people who have cars and need to park, and residents, but also there's all those people who don't, and making sure that their voices are coming through in consultations around controlled parking zones, for instance. So that's just a couple of things I'd say on that. So do we have any questions in the chat that I don't know if, John, you've spotted any good ones that you'd like to raise?
I think most of them have been answered. Let me have a look though.
So if anybody has would like to, then we've got 10 minutes. We can stay here till 1:45 if lots more questions have. So please do put your hand up if you'd like to say something or ask a question of our panel. Or unless John.
I just say there's somebody's asked about contact details and slides. I think all of our slides are on the website. Would we be able to just reshare that link?
Yeah, John.
Yeah.
John can. Sorry.
I'll do that.
Great. So we'll just reshare the page where all the presentations will be, and we will be putting the recording of this on there too. So so do we have any questions, or are there any questions? And has anybody picked up anything in the chat from our panel that they'd like to mention? Don't be shy. You've done such a good job of answering all the questions, everybody. There must be somebody here who would like to ask a question of somebody on our panel.
I can see.
Yeah, so I'm just going through the chat to see, just to catch up with all the questions and see if there's anything there for me to respond to.
William. William has a hand up. William Britton. Oh. Okay, so Sylvia.
Hi, thank you.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, okay, you go first, William.
Okay, sorry, I was struggling to unmute. One of the you came and spoke to us actually last year, Alice, you may remember, in Highgate. One of the issues with traffic and cars seems to me is that at least around here, one pays to park, and correctly so. And there's been a lot of, everyone thinks that that's right, and it does restrict the ability. It discourages people to buy cars and to own cars. The trouble is, it doesn't really restrict people from using them, because our big issue is the school run, and people don't park. They drive their offspring, in a very large car typically, and they don't have to park. They just hover around, block the streets and so on, get in the way of pedestrians and cyclists, cause danger on the zigzag lines. And I'm actually interested that we've not touched on the question of road pricing, namely charging for driving on the roads, as well as charging for parking on them.
Thanks.
That seems to me to have a lot of potential, and it's not really being. It's been knocking around for a long time, but.
Yeah, thanks. I think that it's fair to say that the coalition, most members of the coalition, if not all, would support road pricing. But we probably haven't mentioned it today because it's not necessarily a street design element that I suppose you could implement immediately. But we would certainly agree with that. I would also mention an organisation called Solve the School Run. If one of our panel maybe could find the link and put it in, Solve the School Run have done a huge amount of work on this. And of course, the other thing I'd probably say is about school streets, really, really important. And Jeremy did show some examples of that where the street is closed, which does discourage cars to an extent, driving school run to an extent, and does at least make walking and cycling or scooting for parents with kids easier. Of course, low traffic neighbourhoods also absolutely key to enable that. Although, of course, school run can still be done by driving in and driving out again, and that can be a problem. But it can start to tackle that problem. So moving on to Sylvia. Oh, sorry, Jeremy, you're going to say something.
Sylvia, really sorry. I'll be super quick. Sorry, William, that is a really, really good point. And Helen made it. Helen Munger asked a question at 13:14, in which I made a reply about main roads and included some information there about road user charging as part of addressing this. But I would say that it is the thing that makes the difference. And, you know, I don't know if you've been following what's been going on in New York City, but again, that's had a huge impact on the traffic volume reduction is sort of in the sort of 10 to 20%, but it's had a huge impact on addressing other issues such as bus journey times and stuff. So do have a look at that response. I popped in a PDF of some work we did about a few years ago. That's exactly right. And Helen's point was really, really helpful in that. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we're going to go to Sylvia and then Hazel and Jeremy. So Sylvia.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Caroline, is the map that you've shown, I was just wondering whether this was going to be a metric used in the Healthy Street Scorecard at some point to see the mapping of the canopy, because that's really important. And the second point, I think it's a question from Councillor Long, which is about the design. They've been assessed to see if they're still working at night.
So that might be a question for Kate, the second one, which was about walking at night time for visually impaired. But Carolyn, can we go to you about the map?
Yeah, certainly. So at the moment, because the way the Healthy Street Scorecard works is by measuring the sort of inputs and outputs, the different indicators to show what progress local authorities are making, where the Data Explorer is a bit different because it's showing where there is a need for, where the greatest need is for car parking to be replaced by street trees. But it would be great, I think, because it's still quite a new area. We will be producing like case studies and things to sort of shine a light on good practice where some local authorities are making progress in that area. But yeah, I guess that's something to look at in future with the partners of the Healthy Street Scorecard Coalition, when planting trees in the curbside, becomes more widespread.
Yeah, we're definitely thinking about looking at that and curbside use more generally. Sorry, I chair that coalition, so that's why I said that. I just wanted to say really quickly before we go to Kate, that the launch of this year's very exciting 2025 launch of this year's Healthy Street Scorecard, where we tell you all about every borough in London and what they've been doing and what they've scored this year. And we will be revealing this year's winners, but also we've got a most improved borough this year who jumped up 5 places in the scorecard. So we'll be revealing which borough that is. So please do sign up for that event. If John, you could pop that link in the chat. Again, that would be great so that people can see that easily. And Kate, just a question there about night walking in the dark.
Okay, I've also spotted one in the chat which is talking about alternatives for trees. The Trees and Design Action Group has some really good tools. So Sustrain and TDAG, if you want to look at different species to use, you can choose from across the world for exactly what situations you want. So for at night, I didn't know if that was for visually impaired people or otherwise. I know Sylvia's involved with London Cycling Campaign. They've got absolutely brilliant resources about women's mobility.
No, it was about walking.
Yeah, so for walking at night, so social safety of areas. So in terms of the physical accessibility, we're using measures like BS8 300 and inclusive mobility. But I don't know if there has been any explicit assessment of improvements in social safety. But with all of the measures that we're encouraging, sight lines are absolutely key, and getting better eyes on the street, so better passive surveillance, natural surveillance in areas. So I guess it would be lovely to have some monitoring and studies done to find out what the alterations are, and if there are improvements, or if there are if it's worse, then we need to look at that and work out how to solve it.
Thanks, and perhaps Janice,
Thank you.
Janice, you could be in touch with Kate on for any more on that. So Hazel, we'll just keep going for a bit and see how we naturally run out of time. I understand that people might have to leave. It's 1:30 now, but we're going to keep going for a bit as long as we've got a few questions. We'll be here till 1:45 latest. Okay, Hazel. Hazel, or shall we go to Jeremy then, and we can come back to Hazel?
Okay. Yeah, I did put this point in the chat. I don't think it was answered. So, Alice, you showed a particularly egregious example of a street where all the front gardens had been turned into parking lots. So, what is the answer to the the point that often when you put in CPZs, that is the reaction. People just pave over their front gardens to avoid having to pay for a parking permit. I mean, we see this all over the place, and it just turns the whole place into a sterile, barren environment. So, what's the answer to that?
Yes, I mean it's difficult because some places you might find that every street is designed so that it's a very big front garden, so that could happen. Some already have controlled parking, and so it would be more difficult. Some kind of are moving towards it, so yes, you've got to guard against it. So it's a question of how can you guard against that, there are lots of ways, I think, that councils can think about the design on their streets so that you don't end up with that situation happening. So, for example, all of the things that we said about what the carriageway needs to support, so that if you put a driveway onto the carriageway, that is a drop curb so that somebody can drive over and into their front garden, then you've effectively privatized that bit of the carriageway. That is the road. That's the technical word for the road, the side of the road. So if you put a driveway in, you've effectively privatized that bit of the road. So one thing is that we're saying is that if the council says, well, we need bits of the curbside, the carriageway for other uses, that means we cannot accommodate a driveway in every single household. Then that's one way that their policy can support fewer front gardens being converted for parking. The other thing to say is that, I mean, as the law currently stands, if you ask for a driveway to be put in, you have to pay for it, but you are allowed to do it. That is, the council must let you, unless they have a good reason within their policy not to. So first of all, the policy is important. You need to be really tight on the dimensions of your that you say as a council. The garden must be big enough to hold a car, and cars are getting bigger, so it must be big enough to hold a big car, not just a small car, because otherwise they end up overhanging the pavement. So there are lots of things within policy that councils can do. Beyond that, I would say that it's really important that if they are converted, that they are green. They can be very green. They can have gravel surfaces or matrix paving, and they can have lots of planting and shrubs around them, depending a bit on the size again as well. So they should have all of that. And in fact, the law does state that they should have that. It's just that it's very hard for councils to enforce that. So that is a problem. And ultimately, from our point of view, I personally feel that councils should have a power to charge for crossover, and that will be an annual charge, because, as I said, otherwise that household has effectively free use of that bit of the road forever. So that doesn't seem fair when it's a public road. The council have to maintain it and everything, and they get that for free. So I would say that they should have the ability to charge for a crossover in the same way that they can charge for a residential parking permit, and that would level the playing field to some extent. So that's my thoughts on that. Hope that helps. There is lots more on this on our front garden page. If you either Google front gardens on the front line or go to the page that we've created, where my presentation has a link to that page, or just Google front gardens on the front line and CPRE London. So going to Katie R. Brighton.
Oh, hi, yes, Katie here. So firstly, I'm going to go to Hazel because her microphone isn't working. So I've got actually 2 other comments as well. So if you can come back to me afterwards, that'd be great. But the first one is from Hazel. She says, her question is, what can you recommend for using trees, build outs and parklets to help slow traffic down on a wide and straight 20-mile-an-hour road, which is assumed to have traffic calming in Yorkshire, North Yorkshire Council. Basically, I think that's using design features to slow traffic on a straight road. And are you able to signpost to organisations that may be able to contribute in advice and funding?
Okay, so I live on a road which is ridiculously wide, and people and cars, it's very short, and I've seen the stats and they get up to over 40 miles per hour. It's incredible. They turn the corner and put their foot down, and it's shocking. So I keep saying to the council, can we please just put in some build outs, and Jeremy talked about a particular kind of a particular type of speed bump. So you don't want the cushions, you want the what do you call them there, Jeremy? Sinusoidal?
Yeah, sinusoidal humps. So it's because of the shape of an S.
Okay. But also road narrows. So the road needs to be, no excess width. You can also put in a chicane if you've got a real problem, so that only one car can pass in either. So you can a car can either go in one direction or the other direction, but they can't pass one another. So one has to wait. So that would be the other thing. And I've seen that in, for example, streets near schools, where they create a lot of chicanes so that it completely slows the traffic. So there's some ideas there, but there's also, I guess, Jeremy, maybe you're putting some ideas for guidance in the chat there.
Yeah.
But also, I guess you could contact Jeremy.
Yeah, so exactly. So thanks for that, Katie. Hazel's question was point was at 13:30, and I put some more detailed answers in there. I really would. I mean, nobody looks at it. It's a fantastic document, the TfL Achieving Lower Speeds Toolkit. I'm going to pop it into the general chat. It is really useful for how this stuff works. Yeah, that's all.
So if it's okay. So
yes.
Katie, come back just in very briefly. So I just wanted to make a comment on the questions about nighttime stuff. So I walk quite a lot as well at nighttime in my city. And what I have noticed is where we have a lot of curbside parking, the street lights are much less effective because they're blocked constantly by the cars and you get massive dark patches. And as soon as you have a section which doesn't have curbside parking, those street lights can do their jobs properly. So reducing parking is absolutely brilliant for dark time walking because you just get much better street lighting. You don't get the dark corners. And in the end, I've actually ended up walking down this where it's quieter down the carriageway because I know the street lighting is more consistent there. The second point was about the driveways. So in terms of, let's go back to transport hierarchy, which puts pedestrians and wheelchair users and power users top. So a footway is a footway, and that is the holy space of travel. It's the highway, and it doesn't belong to anybody. It can never be privatised. So if you've got a car in a front garden and you want to put that car in your front garden, you have to get approved access across that footway. And presumably your council can just say no. They can just say, no, you can't do that because it's a footway. And it is the holy space of travel. And it's not built to have your car driving over it many times a day. And also we want to do something else with the space. But essentially, in terms of keeping cars off driveways, I would love to see a council being put to the test a bit more on being told, on telling people, no, you can't just put your car on your house. Just because you own a car doesn't mean you can keep it there. In the same way that if I had an elephant, we probably wouldn't let you keep that on your front garden either.
It's much worse than that, Katie, unfortunately. Not only is it legal, it's positively encouraged. They've removed permitted development. It has permitted developments. Don't have to get planning permission. You just have to apply to the council for a crossover, and the council have to give it to you unless they have a good reason, and that's why I say their policy is super important. It's really important to have a tight policy. So, and it gets even worse than that, because I think it was Eric Pickles, but I might be wrong, who made it, so who said you didn't have to declare any income from renting out your front garden for parking for up to 2 cars.
So perhaps this is something we need to take back to Active Travel England and see if we can get that legislation altered.
Yeah, maybe one of the national bodies could pick this up. I do what I can on front garden parking, and it's a massive issue. And I cannot tell you how many people who I walk past, and even that little picture that I showed you of the flower bed in front of my house, which I look after, every time I'm working on it, literally every single person who comes past says, "Oh, it's so lovely, thank you so much." And I just think everybody likes flowers. People feel devastated when front gardens which had flowers and greenery and trees go, and they turn into, and people don't like it. People love greenery and flowers, and it is a popular thing. And I think we have to, you know, remember that actually this stuff is supported by people, and people do like it, and we have to, so I would say definitely we need to campaign to make it much harder to change front gardens.
I wonder if Ed Miliband would come on board with that. He's quite keen on this stuff, actually. So it could be a sort of double pronged thing. That's national stuff and big picture. I'll stop now. Thanks very much.
No problem. Not at all. Jeremy, I don't know if, Jeremy, you have managed to get your speaker working. You still got your hand up, but if not, we're nearly at the end anyway. So unless anybody has any more comments from our panel or anyone else hand up, I'll probably wrap things up now. So yeah, just a reminder that we've got the launch of the Healthy Street Scorecard coming up on the 8th of July. That's a 10 o'clock in the morning launch. We've very excitingly got some senior politician coming along. I nearly gave away getting along there. Yes, so if you could come along and find out what your boroughs are doing, that would be amazing. You can sign up either via our website or via our the link in the chat. Great, there's the link again. And yeah, thanks so much to our panel. That was the most amazing set of presentations I've seen for ages, and virtual round applause for everybody. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for coming. That was brilliant. And we'll see you soon, I hope. Goodbye for now.
Thanks for organising, Alice.